Oh no, I put record before I was ready. Bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, ba, ba-da, ba-da, ba. Bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, ba, ba-da, ba-da, ba. Bum, bum, ba-da, ba, ba, bum, ba-da. Bum, 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 ba-da, ba, ba, ba-da, ba-da, ba. Bum, ba-da, ba-da, ba. Bam, ba-da, ba-da, bam. Bum, bum, ba-da. That's how big of a Devo fan I am, is that I even have memorized the instrumentals. Hi, everybody. How are you? Great. Okie dokie pokey. Let's see what we got. Yeah, we'll start with this one. First up this week, we have Codename Ric Flair from the good people at Scout Comics. Now, I do not recognize any of the names on the creative team, and I haven't watched wrestling. I'm sure I've discussed wrestling on this thing a few times, so I'm not going to go into it again. But when I was a kid, I was way more into WWF. You couldn't even get NWA slash WCW where I grew up. I don't even know how kids saw it, and they knew. I remember in the seventh grade and hearing some eighth graders talking about the National Wrestling Association, which is what the World Class Wrestling um, Federation used to be called until um, the initials NWA got used for something else. I can't remember what now. But I remember hearing these eighth graders talking about like, oh, dude, Lex Luger, no, 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 and I was like, what? Is there a whole universe that I'm not familiar with? But of course, as I grew older, and that was also like Sting was in, the guy for the Police was in the WCW there. This isn't the early. This would have been 1990, I think, 89, 90. Um, but Ric Flair quickly became larger than any federation. I think Ric Flair did eventually wrestle in the WWF when it was still the WWF, but when I was not still paying attention, I could be wrong. I should ask uh, our resident wrestling expert and very funny and talented comedian Matt McCarthy, who is a regular at the shop. And when I have a wrestling question, I always make sure to jot it down for him. So I will do that. And yeah, Ric Flair is just he's great. Even though he wasn't a favorite of mine growing up, he definitely embodies what professional wrestling ought to be. He's big and loud and colorful. He seems like his character certainly is an asshole, but he's still the face. I don't. He might have been heel every now and again, but he was always the good guy from what I can recollect. And he's got the woo catchphrase. Who doesn't love that? And yeah, he's a lot of fun to watch. And I'm assuming in this book here, he's a secret agent of some sort, which is always fun. I always enjoy a story like that, like Confessions of a Dangerous Mind type thing, where a guy you would normally. I mean, this is obviously a little goofier than Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, although that is extremely goofy. The difference is Chuck Barris really seemed to take it very seriously. Ric Flair is clearly not really a secret agent, or maybe he is. Maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Wouldn't be the first time. Also this week, Hairball #1 by Matt Kent and Tyler and Hillary Jenkins. Um, shit, I want to say Tyler Jenkins did or does. Nope, that's not right. I did look up a few things before I started this, but not this. Anyway, I don't know if you can tell either that there's a severed human finger at the bottom here. So Hairball is not all he seems. I did read the solicit, and I can't remember if this is like a horror thing or more of like a crime thing. But it's Matt Kent, so and I'm pretty sure Tyler and Hillary Jenkins worked on Fear Case with Matt Kent, but I could be mistaken. Regardless, Matt Kent is who I'm here for. But this next funny book is what I've been waiting for without even really realizing it. This is Planet of the Apes, Volume 2, Number 1, from the good people at Marvel Comics. I don't know if you're familiar with all the ins and outs of corporate America's vis-a-vis the entertainment industry. Planet of the Apes, which has always been a 20th Century Fox property, uh, and 20th Century Fox was bought by good people at the Disney Corp. And so now, like they did with the Predator and the Aliens books, they're bringing in yet another Fox property. And finally, I'm a huge fan of Planet of the Apes. I with it, and this was my pick for the shop. And as I wrote in that little email, I've got every movie or TV show Planet of the Apes on DVD somewhere. I haven't finished some of them because some of them are terrible. But I have the first five movies, the original five on one set. There was a short-lived live-action television show in the '70s, which I couldn't get more than 4 episodes through, but I own it. God damn it! There was also a Saturday morning cartoon. It was either Saturday morning or after-school cartoon. Also terrible. Also impossible to get through more than a couple episodes. This was like 10 years ago. I went on a big spree because the Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Rise, whatever the second one of the new movies is, had just come out, and that's probably my favorite after the original. That was I haven't that actually oddly enough I don't own on DVD because by the time it came out in the aftermarket, DVDs were gone. I didn't even have a DVD player at that point. I am gonna plunk down the money to buy it on YouTube, maybe even tonight. No, I got Mandalorian to watch tonight soon because, as I said, it's my absolute favorite besides the original. Now, this one looks as though it takes place in the original series because there's also the Tim Burton version, which I also own, which I saw in the theater. In fact, at a drive-in theater with my roommate here when we were children, and it wasn't great, but I remember liking it. Tim Burton's last good movie was Mars Attacks, and Planet of the Apes was like 5 years after that, but it was still a watchable Tim Burton movie, or so I thought. Because then 15 years went by, and I tried to watch it again, and I couldn't. I tried, I think, two or three times to watch it, and I fell asleep each and every time. So sorry, Mark Wahlberg. I guess you'll have to think of something else. I'm not sure where in the original series this takes place. If you're not familiar, there's of course the original Planet of the Apes. I used to have a great bit about this that never ever ever worked. Yeah, Planet of the Apes and Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which was basically just trying to was basically retreading the first movie. A guy shows up on this planet looking for Charlton Heston and his crew, and then it's Earth, and then I hope I didn't spoil that for anybody. I will say this: I don't know. I might have told this story. Um, my oldest boy was about 8. He and his sister, who was about 10, I guess at the time, were visiting. This was also about 10 years ago, 2015, I want to say. And this was in the summer, and they were playing the original Planet of the Apes at the movie theater downtown San Diego. So I was like, "Oh, good! I can have them in a room and be quiet for 2 hours, and also get to watch one of my favorite movies." Um, it was first of all, it was great because they had an opening bit where the one of the Manx or one of the other guys who host TCM interviewed Dr. Zayas, as played by the great, very funny and talented Dana Gould. So that was fun for me, even though the kids had no idea who the fuck Dana Gould was, or even indeed who Dr. Zayas was yet. Uh, they loved it. Spoiler alert: they loved the movie. They they were giggling about it at first because it is kind of hard, especially if you're a child and you see special effects from. I mean, in my son's case, 50 years before he was born, to the year, in fact, and especially when Cornelius and what's her name, Kira, when they kiss, they they giggled their heads off. But then I remember at around Act Two, looking over at them, and they were just they were enwrapped. And I don't think I even asked them if they knew anything about it. I just hoped they hadn't had it spoiled for them, and they hadn't. But after the movie, Marley was like, "Well, I figured it out," and I was like, "Show you that, kid." whatever you say. I think they both said they were like, oh, I could. I was like, did you though? Because I looked at them and they were both pretty into it. Is all I'm trying to say. Hence, that was what I thought of spoilers. So then you have what was the third one? Escape from the Planet of the Apes, wherein Cornelius and either Kira or Zira, the two main apes, Roddy McDowell and the other lady, um, escape from the Planet of the Apes just as it blows up to come to present day Earth, and then conquest of the Battle of the Apes takes place in Century City, just down the street here, and that's the one where the apes. This is like the midpoint, I guess, where apes. Oh, that's right. No, it's that. Who gives a shit? I think this might, and then battle is battle. No, it goes like this. It goes Planet of the Apes is in the far flung future, and then beyond. I don't know why I'm using this visual. Planet of the Apes in the far flung future. Beyond the Planet of the Apes, uh, just beyond that, and then Escape from Planet of the Apes is in 1970s Earth, and then Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is in the 80s, I would guess, or the 90s, because then in that one, Caesar is older. He's like a grown ape, and apes are not allowed to talk, but he does. And then uh, Battle for the Planet of the Apes is when the apes who have been the talking apes who have been enslaved by humanity overthrow them, thereby bringing us to the lawgiver, who then brings us to the original. I love it. I love Planet of the Apes. So this looks like it might take place around that time. It's people versus apes, and I don't think. Well, I guess the new movies did use this logo too. So maybe it is taking place within the new trilogy, which I also love. But regardless, they're just Marvel had a Planet of the Apes comic, a regular monthly comic in the late '70s, early '80s, which aren't impossible to find, but you don't see them around a lot. I have a handful, I think. And then they did it also in magazine size. Then Adventure Comics got the license in the '90s, which was an imprint of Malibu, and those were pretty bad, but I will still buy if I see. And then was it Boom or Dynamite? More recently, did some Planet of the Apes series, which are good. I like them. And then they've done stuff like they had Green Lantern on Planet of the Apes, which was really good. King Kong on the Planet of the Apes, that was bananas, and that was only like 6 years ago. So this franchise, I think, still has plenty of life left in it. Plus, they gave script to David F. Walker, who's been one of my favorites since his woefully underrated Shaft series. He did two miniseries starring um, Shaft, the sexy private dick who something with the chicks. What is it? No, it doesn't matter. He's a complicated man and no one understands him but his woman, is what I'm getting at. And so Walker wrote that. That was the first thing I remember. And then I've bought pretty much everything since then. He wrote really good Power Man and Iron Fist series that also didn't last very long. His stuff doesn't seem to last long. I hope that's different with this one. But, who knows? I'm just very excited to read a Planet of the Apes comic. Guess what I'm going to be reading first? All right, did I do the back sign? Pixel last one. Yeah. Okay, let's go. We'll go this. First, Grant State Punk. Now, look, I made up my mind when I started doing this, even before that, to try to be less negative. And it hasn't worked at all. I'm if anything, I'm more negative these days. But I still like when I'm talking funny books because that's one thing that you see. It doesn't have to be online. That's the thing about comic book nerdery is everybody was a troll before there was even the fucking internet. Comic book nerds, and I'm definitely including myself in this, piss and moan about everything. And I think I had been working in the other shop for 5, 10 minutes before I was like, oh, this is what I sound like. Surround these jerk offs, bitching and moaning. Oh, we're not doing it. Even my current boss, once we were talking about, uh, when I first started working there, we were talking about movie adaptations and ones that suck and ones that don't. And he actually used the phrase, well, they never do it right. And I was like, Jesus Christ, you guys, There is no right or wrong with this stuff. There's no right way to adapt a comic book into a fucking movie. It's just impossible. I mean, I'm not saying it can't be done, but I am saying that if you want it to be a panel for panel recreation, go watch fucking Watchmen, because that also sucked. I don't know if anybody's aware of that. I shouldn't. I don't. I never actually saw that movie. um, because I'm on Team Alan Moore, and so I refuse to pay to watch that movie. Um, I mean, not that I would have to pay to watch it at this point, but I still just don't want. Why did I get off onto that rant? Oh, right. So yeah, I started working at the old shop in 2005, and it wasn't long before I just kind of got sick of hearing nerds complain about things, especially because I had walked away from comics for about 5 years in my late teens, early 20s, for all the precise because I was complaining about stuff, and then I went, yeah, "Why the fuck am I complaining? I shouldn't even be reading this shit if it's that bad." So I stopped. Then when I came back to it, I went, "Oh, it's great! I love comic books. What am I talking about?" And so, even though there are definitely things that I can be critical of, I love comics so much that I'm tired of people pissing on them. Let the normies do that. That's what dum dums who don't read comic books do. They look down their fucking noses, and especially now with all the how popular superheroes are movie wise, everybody's like, "I'm so sick of it." To which I say, "Good, fuck off, and I can have the comics back." I'm tired of Marvel being the biggest thing on earth. I want it to be mine again. So when I started this stupid thing, I was like, okay, I'm not. I mean, the original reason I started this was for the old comic book store I used to work for, and since that was going to be a promotional tool, I didn't want to be shitty on that. That lasted all of 3 months before I fucking quit that place anyway. So then when like the following, I guess it would have been about a year and change later that I started doing this again. I'm like, I'm just gonna try that. I'm gonna try and stay up. But then I read something like this. I'm like, "God, this kind of sucked." It wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. Which is that's the other thing too. Is like I almost feel like my compromise to not being negative is to kind of damn with faint praise, or to say something to the effect of like, it wasn't the worst thing I read. Which is that's not. I'll say this though. What I was talking about last week about how difficult it is to adopt punk rock into comic books, this kind of backs me up on it. It's just, it wasn't terrible. It was just nothing I hadn't seen before. And I mean, even that in itself, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, what am I going to see in the new fucking Spider-Man I brought that I bought that I've never seen before in a Spider-Man comic? It's hard to explain too. So I was thinking about it as I was reading it. The main character is like a petty thug, and he narrates the comic in a very Tyler Durden sort of way. Maybe that's it. When I was 22 when Fight Club came out, and like most young men at my age, I immediately adopted it as a new religion. But 10 years went by, and I revisited the movie, and I was like, man, this guy needs a hobby. That's all. I mean, I know he doesn't want to watch TV anymore, but I don't know. Maybe look. I mean, there's a lot of good shit out there. I guess in 1999 there wasn't. So I think it's the same thing here. Like this is a character that I would have probably related to as a teenager, but as a sophisticated man in his mid 40s, I just kind of find it a little cliche. I guess it's just it's kind of it's territory that's been kind of explored already. That's all, I guess. If you've never seen Fight Club before, it's the greatest thing you've ever seen. My 15-year-old son watched it recently. Obviously, he loved it. And I told him the same thing, though. I was like, well, you love it now. And I still think it's a good movie. I just can't sit through it anymore. So that's what. And at least it was just a one shot. I mean, I'm all for supporting indie books, but sometimes they stink too. And that's just the way it goes. This one, speaking of indie books, um, this was great. This was exactly what I wanted. It. I looked it up. This is one thing I looked it up. What I was reaching for last week was a book called The Hulk and the Thing and the Big Change, which is written by Jim Starlin and drawn by Bernie Wrightson. They might have actually. I don't know if Starlin inked it, but I don't think so. I think Starlin just wrote it. Starlin has always been a writer and artist, so he doesn't need to draw. He can write the stuff. I mean, he's is he a better artist than a writer? I think that's fair, but he's not a terrible writer. But this was that. That was this. The Hulk and the Thing get sucked into uh, onto another planet in the middle of a big fight that they don't know what it is, so they just start punching things, especially the Hulk. And this is your classic uh, Hulk smash Hulk, leave Hulk alone Hulk. So yeah, it's exactly what I wanted. It was exactly what I hoped. I loved it. Oh boy, another half hour. This one was great. This was the indie book that I really liked, and it was largely, you know, the magazine Heavy Metal is often used as the touchstone for this kind of sciencey fictiony stuff with swear words in it and possible sex, which is kind of lame because heavy metal's not that great. This actually reminded me more of the work of Brandon Graham, who did books like Rain Like Hammers, I think, or is that Ivan Brandon? I think it's Brandon Graham. Brandon Graham, Daniel Warren Johnson. I think I mentioned those names last week too as I was talking about this. So you see, you have a big sciencey fictiony thing, and then you also have a skinny broad with a great rack. That's very heavy metal. Now the reason, though, that I think I use heavy metal as a shorthand, even though I don't even really read heavy metal that often, is because it really was the first science fiction thing that really tried to break out of the hokey old hard sci-fi type stuff in comics anyway. In the 60s, guys like Harlan Ellison and Philip K. Dick were writing stories that also had swear words in them. And they were pushing the envelope there, which you know, Philip K. Dick would politely disagree and Harlan Ellison would impolitely agree. But I'm pretty sure that's right. But in comics, comics always takes, or at least they used to, always take longer to kind of catch up. And so yeah, heavy metal was really the first thing in the '70s to do adult science fiction, which yeah, it means fucking, but it also just means science fiction that's not just space opera. It's not just I Robot and your kind of Isaac Asimov bullshit. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. Hard science fiction sucks. I will die on that. Hard sci-fi is for scientists. That's what they enjoy. In much the same way that normal people. You read a book or a comic, you watch a movie, you identify with the character, the protagonist, if the artist is doing his job or her job, and you enjoy living vicariously through that character. Scientists don't do that, to my understanding. They're too analytical. But if you give them a protagonist who's like, oh, I can figure out this problem. There was a book I bought years ago. I think it was called Robot City, and I bought it because of that title. And it purported to take place kind of in the Isaac Asimov universe, like all the rules of robotics would apply, and I knew those, and so I started to read it, and it was so fucking boring. It was like reading a book of word problems, and I didn't even get past like the first or second chapter for it. Now, give me like a heavy metal-y thing with like the three laws of robots and stuff like that, and I'm totally on board. It's just when it's all hard science fiction, it sucks. And I don't think soft is the appropriate term for science fiction such as this. I guess I don't know. It definitely leans more on the fiction than it does on the science. And that's honestly something, even outside of hard sci-fi purists, you'll find people not unlike like Harlan Ellison would would do that. Would get up people's asses for not being scientifically accurate. But gives a shit. I don't. On a lot of tangents tonight, so I'll stop the one I almost just went on. This was a lot of fun, though, and I think there's more forthcoming, but I can't be 100% sure because nobody can end a goddamn. Oh no, yeah, they did. To be continued. All right, so good. What's the story, Jim? It doesn't matter. There's swearing. That's really all I wanted to get across. Kids tell your teachers to go fuck themselves, and you can tell them I said so. And they'll say a weirdo on the internet told you to do something like that, and you'll say yeah, and they'll say okay. Well, you're still suspended for using the F word at school. Okay. What? Good night.